to the Kennedy Events Podcast, where we feature top marketing, communications, and future of work leaders and share their biggest takeaways and insights. We love these conversations and hope you will too. Let's get started.
Welcome to the Kennedy Events Podcast. I'm your host, Paige Buck. Past guests have included Pam Perez of the Chase Center, John Silva of Culinary Eye, and Elaine Honig of Studio 440. And today I am delighted to be talking to Justin, the co-founder and CEO of AssetMule, a SaaS platform that helps GTM teams create sales assets in minutes. Having spent the last decade building sales and marketing practices at early stage and hyper-growth companies, Justin Dorfman has experienced firsthand the friction and misalignment that exists between these teams when it comes to sales collateral creation. With AssetMule, he's on a mission to build a bridge between sales and marketing by helping these teams work better together to create high-quality, personalized sales assets that win more business. Before we get started, today's episode is brought to you by Kennedy Events. Kennedy Events creates stress-free conferences and events, providing expert management and design for all your corporate event needs, from in-person to hybrid and virtual. You can learn more about us at kennedyevents.com. Justin, thank you so much for sitting through that lengthy intro and for being with me this morning. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in with you. So tell me where the idea for AssetMule came from.
Yeah, so I've been in the SaaS world for a good 15 years. I started my career in SaaS in sales. I actually was an early stage startup salesperson where when you're the first salesperson, you're sort of playing many different roles, wearing many different hats. And alongside selling, you're also creating your own content and your own assets and collateral to use. So, it partially springs from that experience, but also kind of fast forward through a couple years later, I became a product marketer. And in that role, one of my primary responsibilities was actually to support the sales team with the collateral. And luckily I had that previous experience that put me in a decent position to do it. But I found that there was a lot of friction and a lot of challenges between those two teams working together to create the right assets. And specifically, sales sort of are dealing day to day with different situations, different buyers, different needs. And they need assets to be able to speak to those needs. And product marketers, generally speaking, are not, big teams, right? There's usually, in some cases, one product marketer supporting a team of 10 or 20 salespeople. And they are sort of being bombarded with all these requests and can't deliver those assets at the speed that sales needs them. So, there's a lot of salespeople going rogue and tension between the two teams as collateral is created that's perhaps not on brand or on message. And I saw this opportunity here to scratch an itch that I felt, but also we went out there and we spoke to a lot of salespeople and product marketers and found that, hey, this is actually not a unique problem to what I felt. It's something that is pretty widespread out there, and an opportunity might exist to fix this. So that's kind of how the idea of AssetMule came around and the journey that we're on right now.
What are to me, we're a really small team, and even in our really small team, I can appreciate and imagine what some of that friction and misalignment looks like in a larger team, because you go have a conversation and you come back and you're like, what they really want is, or we really need, the way we really need to position ourselves is, and I don't have anything that says exactly that or shows exactly that, but I'm just projecting. What are some of the most common misalignments that you see from both of these seats?
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. I think, the product marketing team is doing the best that they can to create the collateral that sales needs. But again, they're creating something that needs to be usable across many different scenarios. So in the end, the asset becomes quite generic, right? It speaks to the high level value proposition and use cases. It has a couple of quotes in there, hopefully, in stats that are relevant for most situations. But again, every buyer is different. And a salesperson may feel like that quote is not the right quote, right? It's not the right persona or not the right industry. That stat might not speak to the exact use case. And when they reach back out to the product marketer to create an updated asset. Again, the product marketers not just dealing with asset creation, but they're launching products. They're managing a competitive strategies, so many other things on their plate that they can't deliver that stuff in time. So the salesperson goes off and creates that stuff themselves. And then, maybe they create multiple versions of that off each other. And then eventually this new slide deck or this new one pager gets on the product marketer's desk, and it's unrecognizable, right?
And their heads explode.
Exactly. So what we've tried to do is sort of create this centralized platform that both teams can use, where there's a set of templates in there that the product marketing team has created, one pagers, decks, and so on, that the sales team can either use as is if it speaks specifically to their buyer, but also what we're calling a snippet library. And a snippet library is essentially quotes, stats, images, logos, just blocks of content essentially that a salesperson can swap in and out of an asset to personalize it for their buyer, but with the assurance that it's pre-approved and that it's something that the product marketing team is comfortable with being out there in the world. And that's kind of the V0, if you will, of the value proposition, is just creating this alignment between the two teams where personalization at the speed of sales is able to happen, but product marketing still knows that the integrity of that messaging and the branding is aligned with the brand guidelines.
Nice. It sounds really attractive. I mean, I can already picture it. It sounds really easy and attractive and like appealing to both ends. Like I can pull this in, I can make it look the way I want it to. I feel like I have a level of control if I'm the salesperson.
Yeah.
The product marketer, it sounds like, has like brand and image control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also noticed a couple of different, so that was kind of the first insight that we got and sort of what we took out to customer discovery conversations. And we spoke to, about 130 different sales and product marketers, sales reps and product marketers to kind of validate this idea. And there were actually a couple of other problems that sort of came to surface on both the product marketing side and the sales folks that we're exploring solving as well. On the product marketing side, the other piece was, the reason why product marketers can't operate at the speed of sales. One is, I mentioned, they have a lot of stuff on their plate. Product marketers tend to have a lot of different varying responsibilities that are conflicting with one another. So that's one piece. But the other piece is that they have a dependency in a design partner, right? A design team that's sometimes in-house, but a lot these days is actually an external consultant designer. Mm-hmm. And to get the new designed one pager or deck can take a week or two, right? Oh yeah. So what we've also tried to build into the platform is more of a self-serve design, a tool. So if you think about, we're kind of following in the footsteps of some of our web page design systems that now exist, like Instapage and those drag and drop WYSIWYG sort of solutions. We're trying to follow a similar path for the product marketer as well, where they can actually build their own templates into the system without having to rely on design resources, but pulling from a sort of library of components. And again, because we're so focused on this sales asset use case, we're gonna be pretty prescriptive and make sure that like all the components that they need are available to them. So that's one piece. And then I'd say on the sales side, a really interesting discovery was just that, sales assets are pretty boring, right? Like they tend to be PDFs, right? They're static, they're boring, they're one-dimensional. And the funny thing is we're not printing these things off anymore, right? Most people are viewing these PDFs on their web browser, right? So there's no reason for them to be so boring and static. So we found that there's an opportunity here to perhaps make them more interactive, right? More engaging. And there's small things that you can do like video and things like that you can embed in a deck or a one pager to make it more interesting, but also things like, building a live chat into an asset so that if a prospect has a conversation, they can have, a chat with their sales rep right then and there, or, a book a meeting button right into the asset, or things like that, widgets that they can interact with that make it more interesting for the buyer, and more useful for the buyer, but also gives the salesperson a little bit of feedback on what's happening behind closed doors when they throw that asset over the fence, right? So, the customer discovery process, I would say, it's really fascinating, because you might start with one problem and one sort of solution in mind, but as you peel back the onion, a lot of these discoveries come up that are really fascinating, and start to put pieces together to a product that is pretty complete in terms of its workflow and functionality that just started with the seed of an idea. So it's been really, really fascinating.
Absolutely. You're reminding me, like, we use HubSpot on a pretty basic level, because we're a boutique, right? So like 2 or 3 dozen customers is a really good year for us. We're not doing anything at volume when it's that customized and specialized. But when we send a proposal over to a client after we've pitched, and we're using HubSpot for, sending that and seeing how they engage with it, I understand it gives like, oh, they opened it, which is like our primary concern. Did they open the damn thing, or did they never look at it again? And then how many did they send it on? How many opens? But that quickly gets like really skewed when you're like, how is it they've opened it 130 times in an hour? What is it actually capturing there? Like, they toggled past that, they woke up their browser. I can't really tell what's going on. I love that you're talking about something that's more inviting a different level of engagement that lets you see what's resonating for the client. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, and some ideas that we're just exploring are things like, again, decks traditionally, or one pagers, will have images, right? So there's video, and you can talk about, did they watch the video? How long did they watch in the video? But there's also interactive demo products too, right? That can integrate into an asset where the prospect can actually try out a interactive demo and point and click, and you can see what they're interested in, and it can give you feedback on that. To things like ROI calculators, right? That help tell a story of the potential ROI of the solution that you're selling. And if you know that you're a champion, or even better, maybe they shared it with their CFO, and the CFO put some digits, some numbers into the ROI calculator and is exploring that. That's really interesting feedback and insight for a salesperson to see what's happening behind the scenes. Because a salesperson really in a sales process, let's say a 6 to 9 month sales process, a really, enterprise sales process, spends a really small amount of time actually speaking with their prospect, right? A lot of the times is actually just preparing your champion to pitch for you and make a case for this, right? So being able to see what's happening and get some feedback on that is I think a game changer for salespeople.
Tell me more about that, and how someone in that sales role, like, I guess, learns the nuances of the individual champion, and then what have you found works in terms of like building them up to actually, evangelize for you inside their company?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And the way that I think about it, so I mentioned that I was a salesperson first, and I spent about 10 years in sales and enterprise sales. And I found that there was always, if you manage the sales process the right way, right? And what I mean by managing the sales process the right way is really listening to your customer, your prospect, getting a really deep understanding of their need, and proving to them that you understand their need by presenting them a solution that specifically solves that need, right? And that's done through discovery calls and tailored demos, what I used to call solution presentations, because again, it's not just a demo of a product, you're presenting the solution to the challenge that you discovered. There's a point in that conversation where you can feel it, right? It turns from you sitting across the table from your prospect to you guys actually now sitting on the same side of the table.
Yes.
And for me as a salesperson, it would usually be in the proposal process, where you've put together a proposal for a solution for your prospect, and you're not presenting it to them and their boss yet, and so on. You're doing this prep call almost, right? Where you're walking through it with them, you're filling in some information that might be missing in it, you're kind of validating that what you've put on paper is accurate. During that conversation, you can start to feel this shift where now they've bought into the solution, they know it's the right solution for them, and now you guys are going to work together to make the case internally. So I think that's really where it happens, and it's all that that work that leads up to that moment in terms of really asking the right questions, repeating those questions back, and just making it clear that you're not just trying to sell them something, you're trying to solve a problem for them, and you understand what the problem is on a deep level, and you're in a position where you can actually put together a solution that could solve that problem.
Before we got started, you were telling me about your co-founders and what your team looks like right now. Would you share that a little bit with our audience? Like who else is behind the scenes making this happen, or out in front?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So right now we're a team of 3. So it's myself and 2 co-founders. I'm the sort of CEO of the company, but today I'm really playing a lot of the role of a product manager. As I mentioned, I'm sort of selling to myself in a way. I was a product marketer, I was a salesperson, so scratching my own itch. I'm sort of leading that process as the person that's trying to solve the pain point that I felt and can empathize with the pain point of these folks that I'm talking to. Our other co-founder, George, is our GTM sort of co-founder. So he, one thing that we really believed in and that we wanted to make part of our go-to-market strategy from the very beginning is sort of building a community before even launching a product, right? Being part of the conversation, creating value, and building an audience that then you can launch to. We've heard a lot of people out there have a ton of success with that path, and it's something that we really wanted to make part of our go-to-market strategy. So George is the perfect person to lead that effort. In prior sort of startups and in his own personal sort of passion, he's built podcasts and he's built communities and events and all kinds of things. So he's sort of laying the groundwork of our brand essentially, and building out our audience and our community. And then our other co-founder is Dane Lyons. So Dane is our technical co-founder. He's an incredibly talented engineer, full stack engineer, which makes it really, really incredible for us because he can do everything from the back end challenges to the front end design. And he also is a company builder, not just a product builder. So he's been through several startups. He started his own in the past, and he really gets sort of the process, not just from an engineering standpoint, from a company building standpoint. So it's a really interesting team that we have, a small, but I think pretty diverse skill set, and one that I think is really relevant for the market that we're building for.
It sounds like you've got all of the right seats for where you are right now, because I've certainly seen, and we've had clients who are in several stages ahead of you, but where they started as 2 engineers, and one of them had to begrudgingly be okay, I'll go out there and talk to people,
Yeah.
or I'll try to actually express why someone would want this instead of just building the thing, in your garage.
Yeah. And I'll say the other thing that's kind of interesting about us is that we've known each other for a long time, or at least I've known George and I've known Dane individually for 10 years, right? So
Wow.
We've known each other for a long time. George, I met at the first SaaStra conference. We sort of found out very quickly that we are sort of made from the same cloth, right? We're startup guys that just love this, and we stayed connected throughout the years, collaborated on a couple of different things. And then Dane is actually the partner, the husband of the CMO of a company that I worked for previously, where I worked very closely with her. At the time, she was the VP of sales and I was the head of sales development, and we were sort of partners in crime. And I met Dane through her, and we connected on just product building and startup building. So the sort of start of this all was George and I were sort of both figuring out what our next things were, and we're sort of venting on interview processes and so on. And George made the comment, hey, what if we just started something? Wouldn't that be awesome? I wish we could just do that. We just need a technical co-founder, right? And sort of what I happened to be having a parallel conversation because Evie Lyons, who, as I mentioned, was the CMO that I worked with previously, was trying to convince me at the time not to join another company, but to start my own thing. And she had connected me with her partner, Dane,
That's awesome.
as a potential technical co-founder. So I brought the conversations together, and immediately I think the first part of the conversations actually weren't about like what we want to build or what space we even want to build in, but it was about like what type of company we want to build, right? What are the values we want to really put forth in a company that we would build? And we just aligned on that to start with, is we really thought about company building in a lot of the same ways. We had similar experiences in the past that had led us there. And then it came to, well, what space are we passionate about building? And all of us have played in the sales and marketing tech space. So very quickly, we were aligned on that as well. And then it was about sort of figuring out, okay, now we kind of know what company and what sort of space we want to build in. What are the problems that exist out there? And it's interesting because one thing that in the past has held me back from starting a company is I never felt like I had a good enough idea to start a company. And I always felt like you had to have an idea to start a company. But kind of through this process, what I've learned is that even if you don't have an idea, if you know sort of the space that you want to build in, and you start to speak to a lot of people that operate in that space, very quickly you'll start to see trends on problems that emerge and exist, and come up with ideas. And actually, that might be a better place to start, right? If you start with a problem, you may end up coming up with an idea and a product that people actually want, right? Versus if you start with the idea, everybody, tells the story of a startup as this, light bulb idea, and then they go out to market. But actually, I think that path more frequently than not leads to building something that people don't actually want, right? So it was kind of interesting how this led us down a better path, I think.
Oh my, so I hear so much wisdom in what you're saying. I mean, I just wrote down like 3 things. One, and I want to ask you about each of them. I heard you say that you started from the values that you wanted in a company.
Yeah.
2, that you then only then did you start thinking about the space that you wanted to be in. And 3, that you came in, and what I heard in that is like, you were all willing to set ego aside. You don't have to say like, oh, we know best. We have all the answers. We have all this, we've already got it figured out. That's what I feel like I hear so much in other entrepreneurs that makes me think, one, I'm not like you, like that's not me. I don't have that. But also like, how do you know anyone's going to want that thing?
Yeah.
And how do you know that by the time, who makes you think you can build it best? There's also that too. Like you, just because you have the idea doesn't mean you're the person to deliver it. Where it sounds like the 3 of you have like circled up around something and you know you can do.
Yeah.
And you've done a lot of listening.
Yeah, we did a lot of listening. So we had, we spoke to over 130 people, and we continued to listen, right? So in that process of customer discovery, we started by just asking questions, no product, nothing to show, right? Again, we knew that we wanted to sort of play in the marketing and tech space. We did know a little bit that like there was a problem around, as I mentioned, that I had experience around asset creation and stuff, but we didn't know what the solution was. So we asked, who's creating assets? What are the biggest challenges and things like that? And we started to hear this sort of friction a little bit between the 2 practices, and some of the other things that I mentioned as well, the lack of interactability and engagement with assets, the challenges from a product marketer to create assets so all these things started to pop up, right? So then we built a very, very minimal prototype that we started to demo in these conversations. And again, we started the conversations not showing the product, but asking those questions and then leading into showing this prototype. And as we had those conversations, people would say, oh, this looks awesome, but it would be really great if it did this. Or have you thought about how you're going to, approach this problem? Which started to give us ideas on putting sort of layers to that prototype, which got us, I think, to what people would call an MVP. And then now we're actually,
well, unpack that. What is that?
Yeah, so the MVP is basically the minimal viable product, right? And it's a key principle in the lean startup methodology of building, right? Where we've built something that is at its minimum level in terms of features and capabilities, but can deliver on the sort of promised value, right? It doesn't have all the bells and whistles, right? It's not, it's sort of got the minimum level of functionality that can deliver on that value, or at least
you want to hook somebody on that.
Yeah.
Before you start like, well, because we've all seen products that like overpromise and then can't do half the things or can't do them well.
Yeah, and in this case, I think what you're trying to do is not over-invest on the engineering before you really know that that's what the product, uh, the needed product is, right? So you sort of build the minimum version of it. And what we've done is we've essentially identified 10 or so people from those conversations that we had that really had the need, were really excited about the solution, and we brought them on as what we're calling design partners. And
Yes.
what that means is that they're actually using the product day in and a day out, and they're telling us what are the reasons why they can't use it for a certain use case, what's missing, what's sort of the barrier to usage, as well as what are the areas that really are solving a need and are differentiated out of the market that we can lean further into. And we're working with them over the next couple months to, again, sort of add these layers to the product to get us to a V1, right, where we can launch this more publicly. And the idea through all of this is, again, not to believe in that we know best and that we have, lock ourselves in a room and spend 6 months a year building this product and putting it out in market, hoping that it solves a problem, but sort of building it iteratively based on customer feedback so that the end thing is something that people value and want to use and will use.
What are like one or two of the things that arose for the three of you when you were discussing the company values that you wanted?
Yeah, so all three of us, I think, have sort of gone through the the standard Silicon Valley sort of root story, right? Which is like, you go out there, you get a couple initial customers, you then raise a lot of money, and you try and grow this thing as fast as possible and grow at all costs. And I think we've felt the dark side of that.
Mm-hmm.
We decided early on that this is not the approach that we want to take, and instead we want to build a sustainable business, right? And that may mean that we can't do certain things early on, but that what it does allow us to do is really focus on delivering customer value, right? So that was something that like we sort of aligned on very, very early on, is that we want to build a business that number one, solves a real problem, delivers value that people are willing to pay for, and we want to grow at a pace that is sustainable in terms of profitability, and that we can stand on our own feet, but also that doesn't burn us out as
You mean
well,
like
right?
profit comes in there into the picture somewhere in the first couple of years?
Yeah,
That's
early
really
on.
cool.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's funny because in Silicon Valley that sounds weird, I guess. But you speak to anybody outside of Silicon Valley, and that's how you build a business, right? So
Absolutely.
I think that we're starting to see a little bit of shift as well in the macro environment, and that maybe more companies are going to take this approach, hopefully. But that's at least something that we aligned on very early on. The other piece I would say is that we wanted to build a business where, again, we enjoy working on this, right? Like, we enjoy working with each other, we enjoy working on this problem, and that we don't lose sight of that, right? And again, I think this grow at all costs model sometimes pushes you down paths that you didn't originally want to go down, or that you didn't intend to, and sort of in some cases can make you lose track of the vision, right? And what you started this thing for at the very beginning. So I think that's something that like all of us wanted to keep in mind, and as we continue to grow, always revisit, right? Are we continuing to build a company that we enjoy building with people that we enjoy building, and that is making a meaningful difference for a market that we want to build for, right?
I love
so
that.
that's something.
I love that, because I had another guest recently say that she had heard at a keynote for the event we produced last year. The keynote said, how do they say it? If you bake it in, then it will always be true, like for your product, for your company, for your team. But if you bolt it on, then it will fall off. So in this case, they were talking about like a promise for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're like, if you just say like, oh yeah, sure, that's something we care about right now, then
Right.
as soon as that person leaves, or the climate changes, or anything happens, that will fall away.
Yeah.
that's part of your values from the beginning, then you kind of always come back to that as your touchstone. And you've got that. I love that you start. It's just beautiful. A lot of people don't start there. Really
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. I think it's something that was important to all of us. It does feel weird at the very beginning when you're thinking, okay, we want to build this product, like to step back and start there. But I think like it's going to pay dividends, throughout the years. And again, I don't think that it means like, that we'll never raise money or that we'll never want to scale this thing. It's just like to make sure that, whichever path we go down, that, we're meeting this criteria that we set at the very beginning, that we're still, building on a path for a product that means a lot to us and a company that means a lot to us. And we're solving problems that we're engaged and passionate about.
Nice. So I imagine that your customer conversations help you with this, and also the GTM, like community building, helps with this. But so much is changing so fast. And you just say like the two letters AI, and everybody freaks the F out. But how do you stay on top while you're in this building phase? How do you stay on top of the problems and the challenges that you used to really observe because you were in it, and now you're out of it? How do you stay on top of that?
It's a good question, because I thought about that a lot, right? And partially, like at this stage, it's easier because although in some ways I'm out of it, a lot of the work that I'm doing right now is still product marketing, and I'm still in it. At some point, though, to your point, I hopefully, if we're successful and we grow the company, I will have to move a little bit beyond sort of the day-to-day hands-on stuff. So I think staying in tune with your customers is critical for that, right? And making sure that you never lose that sort of that goal of speaking to X amount of customers, whether it be 5. Right now, my goal is at least to speak to a customer or a potential customer every day, right? So maybe it's keeping that sort of commitment, right? And making sure that you're staying in tune with what's going on and what the real challenges are. And it's interesting that you bring up AI, because obviously, like, that's the number one question that everybody gets these days, right? Is like,
point of like eye rolling for me. Yes, absolutely. But it's real.
Yeah. And we get it as well. Is how are you gonna, use AI for this, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure we will, that's definitely part of the plan. I'm a believer in AI. I think it is gonna have a incredible impact on a lot of different workflows and solve a lot of problems.
No doubt.
But that's the key. I think that you need to make sure that it's solving a problem, right? So there's a lot of solutions out there that perhaps took an AI first approach. They're like, okay, AI is a trend. Let's build something with AI, and then we'll figure out how to apply it to a problem. And I think the approach, again, it goes back to our values. One of our values being like solve real problems, to ask ourselves, okay, this is the problem that we're solving. How can AI help solve that problem better, right? Versus starting with AI and then, trying to find a problem to solve with it, right? So
100%.
that's at least the approach that we've been taking. And again, as an example of how you can use your values, in a day-to-day sort of, use case.
Yeah. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's funny because as we're talking about it and just what I'm learning, I'm realizing how fast I think that the word or the letters AI can start to sound like cloud did a decade ago, where you're like, you just mean that it's not on my computer? Like that's all that means? Like it's just in servers somewhere other than in my office? Like it's pretty basic, but we're still talking about the cloud. Like
Yep. And I mean, you see this with a lot of technologies. I've been lucky enough to be a part of a couple of different sort of shifts, paradigm shifts, if you will. So my first company that I worked at was a cloud computing startup in the early days before even AWS existed and so on. So, and then, I went through a company that was in the influencer marketing space, which was a big sort of a big paradigm shift and a lot of buzz around that. And then
what even is an influencer when it was, but like not a word?
Yeah, exactly. And then most recently in the crypto and blockchain space, which I think is probably the most extreme example of where suddenly everybody is trying to think about, okay, like Web3, what's the Web3 version of this and that? And again, I think all of these technologies, by the way, that I mentioned, AI, Web3 and blockchain and cloud and influencer marketing, again, I think all bring a lot of value. But again, it comes back to what is the problem that they're solving for, and how, first of all, can it, add value in solving for that problem? And if so, how, right? Rather than starting with the technology and then trying to work back to a problem.
Yeah. It's really smart. That's like your grounding principle. I love it.
Yeah.
So in thinking about this also, just in terms of how you stay on top of things, are there mentors or people you really admire in the space that you try to stay in touch with or pay attention to what they're doing?
Absolutely. So there's sort of 2 degrees, I would say. One is people that I've worked with. There's CEOs or founders in the past that I've worked on their startups that I've learned a lot from throughout the years, and have shown a lot of faith and investment in me and helping me progress my career. So I continue to stay in touch with those folks, and I think they're excited that I'm building my own thing, and they're very encouraging, and they're very open to providing feedback. So there's folks like that I'm close to, and then there are people out there that I'm a student of the game. So I read a lot. When I am facing a new challenge or a new situation, I go out there and talk to people, or I try and learn as much as I can about it, right? And there's certain people that I definitely turn to and admire on that front. So some people that come to mind, Dave Gerhardt is a sort of marketing guru. I think he'd sort of not like me calling him that, but like
a guru.
A guru. Now, in a sense, like the reason I bring him up is when I first took on my first product marketing role, I didn't know what product marketing was at all. And he's somebody that I turned to, and I started listening to his podcast, started becoming part of his community. And really the fundamentals of what I learned for product marketing came out of that. So he's still somebody that I follow a lot and learn a lot from. April Dunford is she wrote a book on positioning and messaging called Obviously Awesome. And again, it's one of the books that sort of really opened my eyes to what positioning and messaging is, and how to actually do it, and how important it is, and sort of how it feeds into everything else you do in sales and marketing. So I'd say she's somebody that I definitely look to. And then now, as I enter the role of sort of founder and CEO, I'm following, a lot of the folks that talk about the lean startup and the lean methodologies, right?
Nice.
From Eric Ries, who wrote the original Lean Startup book, to Ash Maurya, who wrote a book called Running Lean. A lot of the principles that I mentioned today that we're following in terms of, customer discovery and learning from the market and iterating on our solution, come from those learnings. So I'm a big learner. There's a lot of people out there that I kind of turn to for guidance and for experience.
I love that. And you're like, and you're like unafraid to learn the role of CEO as you go. And like so much of that is what you're already doing. It's brilliant. Thank you so much, Justin. I really appreciate your time. And would you take a moment just to share with our audience where they can find you?
Yeah, so probably the best place is on LinkedIn. So if you just look up Justin Dorfman, I'm sure there's maybe a handful out there, but the one that is with AssetMule, that's me.
That's you.
Feel free to connect with me there. And as I mentioned, I'm really interested at this point in talking to people that would find our products, valuable, right? That have the challenges that we're solving for, and even that would be interested in being an early tester. We're definitely onboarding our sort of first beta customers and working very closely with them to build out this solution to make sure that we're building something that drives value. So if that's you, reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'd love to chat.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. Just to close us out, it's been a pleasure talking to Justin Dorfman, co-founder and CEO of AssetMule. Thanks so much, Justin.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Kennedy Events Podcast. Come back next time and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.